I'm very excited to return here after 2 years of Corona to Kehilat Har-El with our group from Miami. I bring our best wishes from our entire congregation to all of the members and clergy here at Kehilat Har-El, and I appreciate very much the opportunity once again to share a few words from this week's Torah portion. Thank you very much to Rav Ada and to my old friend Cantor Evan for the warm invitation to be here on this Shabbat. Anyone who knows me well knows that the land of Israel, that the love of Israel and supporting Israel is a major part of my life. And people sometimes ask me, why is Israel so central in my life? Don't I have enough to do in Miami? And I do. But I've thought about it for a long time. Perhaps the reason that is most fitting according to my opinion, is that my Torah portion for my bar mitzvah was this week's Torah portion, Shelach just a few years ago. This week's Torah portion, Shelach is essentially a story of Aliyah, of the Jewish people having the opportunity to come as a group and make Aliyah to Israel. The Torah portion, Shelach builds on the earlier Torah portion that we see. The third Torah portion is the Torah Lech Lecha, only one letter difference. If you put a shin on Lech Lecha, you have Shelach Lecha. And the story of Lech Lecha began, the very first thing that God ever said to a Jewish person was get up and go from this place that you live to a land that I will show you, leave from your father's house, from your homeland, and go to a place that I will show you, which ultimately was the land of Israel, and Abraham got up and left right away. But the story of Aliyah picked up once the nation had been built and had left Egypt and was now on the way back to Israel. In this case now, in our Torah portion this week, is the story of the spies, where 10 of the spies decided that it wasn't worthwhile and it wasn't possible to go into the land of Israel because of the people who were living there were so scary, so large, so big. But I think that I've always identified with one of the two heroes of this week's Torah portion. One is Joshua, but the other, lesser known than Joshua, is Caleb ben Yefuneh, Caleb, the son of Yefuneh. Yefuneh meaning he turned away. He turned away from, his father actually had a different name, but Caleb meant he turned away from the other spies. And when he came to the land of Israel, as we read in the Torah portion, it says, they, the spies, went up into the Negev, but then he, singular, went to Hebron. In other words, the first verb is in the plural, and the second verb is in the singular. It's explained by Rashi that the he, while all the spies went to the land of Israel, Caleb separated from them and went to the city of Hebron. The reason why is because that's where the matriarchs and patriarchs were buried, and he wanted to go there to pray there, that they would give him the strength not to be tempted to go in the direction of the spies who were wrong, or he disagreed with and didn't think the Jewish people could make it into the land of Israel. So, if we look closely at all of the conversations that the spies are having, they never mention the name of God. And it appears that the whole issue of going into Israel is not an issue between them and God, rather it's an issue between themselves and what humanity can accomplish without God's help, which is what caused them to be so afraid. At the same time, Caleb was also focused on people, but with one slight difference. When he separated from the group, he went to Hebron because he recognized that there is something that we see in the Torah portion, where it says, "Vayirashnu otah," that we will inherit the land. But his going to Hebron indicates to us that the Jewish people weren't inheriting the land from God. They were inheriting it from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, who were already given the land. And so he went there to pray with the matriarchs and patriarchs and came back to the rest of the people and said, this is natural. This is where we should be. This is our inheritance. His argument was different than the rest of the spies. Unfortunately, the spies accepted the majority, went with the 10, ended up wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. Our group this morning wandered for about 20 minutes at Genesis land and got a feel for what it was like. And after 20 minutes, we knew that this was not for us, and we needed to get to the David Citadel. I don't know how they did it for 40 years, but I understand why they complained. For a rabbi like me that lives in a faraway country, somewhere very far from here, this story presents a great challenge. We understand from the Torah that even Jews who grew up in other lands, like Abraham, can leave their homeland and recognize that Israel is their natural home. This challenge is supported with more proof from the Talmud. It's written in a tractate of Yoma, one of the tractates of the Talmud, that in the days of Ezra, when the Jews were coming back from Babylonia, most of them didn't want to come. And only a few came with Ezra. And the Talmud essentially argues, if all of you would have come back, like a big wall, then you would have established here in Israel a kingdom that could have lasted forever. But you came back not as a wall, you came back as doors. And because only some of you came back, it presents a real problem. What it's saying is, when you Jews had a chance to go back to the land of Israel, the majority of you didn't do it. And for someone like me who sits in an office in Miami but dreams of Israel all the time, this part of the Torah and this idea in the Talmud presents to me a very personal challenge. And it's a challenge that could be depressing. But I think that there is hope. We know that as we came into Jerusalem today and we looked at the Har-El, as we looked at the Temple Mount, and we learned about the Even Shpiyah, the foundation stone that exists underneath, from where God created the whole world, we learned something very special. That everything in the world, no matter where it is, has its roots right here in Jerusalem. There's a midrash that explains that during the building of the first temple, King Solomon understood that. And so he went and planted in Jerusalem every single type of tree in the world, even trees that you would never find in this region. And the idea was that Solomon understood that no matter where things are in the rest of the world, their roots always stem from Jerusalem. We read we hear when we do Jewish weddings during the Shabbat Brachot in the fifth blessing, that the fifth blessing talks about the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. But you have to understand that sometimes that's saying a return to the Jewish land to people who've never been to the land. So how can you say for someone who's never been to the land of Israel, it's time for you to return? Because the truth is, while you may never have visited Israel, your roots have always been here. And when a Jew comes to Israel, even if it's for the first time, they're always coming home. So to come to the land of Israel from the diaspora, one thing I can learn from this is that even when Jews like me have not made Aliyah, the truth is our roots are still here. We're not like the spies that refused to make Aliyah to the land of Israel. Rather, we prefer to identify with someone like Caleb ben Yefuneh. When we pray 3 times a day, the Tefillah prayer like we did tonight, we also relate to the forefathers and the foremothers. We also recognize that our roots are here in the Holy Land. We pray every day for the goodness of the state of Israel. We raise money all the time for the land of Israel. I heard an American comedian say You know, every time we raise money for Israel, we do it in America. If I would try to raise money for Israel in Israel, I wouldn't make $5. Maybe I would, but and I'm not sure why, but I thought that was a lot funnier. How many of you have tried to raise money? But we spend a lot of time with a lot of different organizations trying to raise money for the land of Israel. And I think that this feeling that we have, that no matter where we are, even if it's in a faraway land like the United States, our hearts are always here. And probably this is what it meant. This is what he meant when Rabbi Yehuda Halevi wrote in his poem, Libi b'mizrach v'anochi v'sos ha'mizrach. My heart is in the east, but my deeds are in the deep recesses of the west. So it's a great, once again a great honor to be here from the Bima at Kehilat Har-El, and to have come all the way from Miami once again to celebrate our partnership and our deep, deep friendship with our sister congregation here in Jerusalem. Wish everybody a wonderful Shabbat. Thank you so much.